Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and host David Lamb.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the attorneys tonight. A fascinating conversation about police brutality. This is another one of those topics that is just right from the headlines and on the news. So much in the public eye right now. We thought it a good idea to bring someone on who is an expert on that. So looking forward to that conversation. Also, as always, whenever we are on the air, there are attorneys standing by right now to answer your questions. That's not an opportunity that you get often enough. So take advantage of that. You'll see ways you can call, text, email. I encourage you, if you have a question and you need some legal advice, now's the opportunity to take advantage of it. Josh Wright of the firm Hollis Wright here to lead us in this conversation. And this really is another one of those that, in the newscast you see all the time, this topic of conversation. So the timeliness of this is just perfect.
Well, we've never shied away from topics that may politically have a couple sides to them.
Right.
And it is straight out of the headlines because it's something we do see on a daily basis. Some cases more high profile than others.
Right.
But tonight the goal is to explain kind of the inner workings of police brutality claims, how those work, and to explain truthfully and honestly that a lot of the claims that people may assert before they get to the lawsuit stage may not necessarily be meritorious. And so lawyers have to work through those claims that are meritorious. And one of the things we'll talk about today is the implication of technology in today's world, video, audio, those things, and how that's changed the dynamic of police brutality cases. We're going to be talking a little bit about that. And when we talk about topics like this, in police brutality is one area. Alan Lasseter from Shuttlesworth Lasseter is on, and Alan is an expert in this area, handles these cases, has handled them for years, and understands this area of the law, and understands more than anybody else just how the dynamic of technology has changed these claims over the years. So first of all, thank you for being on with us to be able to talk about this stuff. This is a specialty. It's a special area of the law, and a lot of times these cases that you file hit the headlines immediately. Talk a little bit about how did you get into this area of the law and become kind of a specialist in this area?
Well, okay, it was sort of accidental. I was handling, I've always done a variety of things in my practice, and I got a few cases along the way that introduced me to what is involved when you bring claims against police officers or any public official, because there's immunity that attaches to those type of cases, and it involved a lot more research and a lot more knowledge than I realized. So as I took on those cases, I began to understand a little bit more what was going on. I was very interested in it, and a lot of constitutional law was involved, and so over time I just started doing more and more of it.
Now, a lot of times federal law, in addition to state law, can be applicable in a case, can't it?
True.
I mean, because we have a lot of times, I know, in cases that we've worked on, there may be a state assault and battery charges, those invasion of privacy, those types of claims, in addition to federal protections.
That's correct.
So how do you, when you advise a client, when you meet a client for the first time related to these type claims, or a family member that thinks that somebody in their family was treated improperly, how do you kind of walk them through the complicated nature of this area of the law? Okay,
well, that's a good question, because that is often what I have to do early on, to try to make people understand that you're not dealing with, as an example, a car wreck situation where someone runs the red light, someone hits someone else. Even non-lawyers understand there's liability there. It doesn't work that way when you're dealing with these type of claims, and it's because of what I mentioned a minute ago, immunity. It's not a negligence case. It's a case where you're trying to show that in a police brutality context, for instance, you've got to show that officer who may have assaulted someone and injured them, that they will lose that immunity under their state law claims for assault and battery, and under the federal protection under the Constitution of the United States. And we're talking mainly about the Fourth Amendment. And so you try to explain to those clients, that it's a different animal, And hopefully they will listen to me or their lawyer who, you know, has a lot more experience there, because it's just not something you run into every day.
When, you know, David, a lot of times what happens is somebody will come in and ask a question, or you know, believe that they have been, you know, there's been a constitutional violation, and it's impacted their life, but it may not be actionable under the law because of immunity, because of some other areas. So it's just, it is something as a lawyer that you've really got to walk and kind of lead, guide, and direct people through.
A question we have here: do police officers have a right to search a person without a warrant?
That's a good question, and the answer is it depends, because with a warrant, when a police officer has a warrant, that means a magistrate or a circuit judge has determined that there was probable cause for a search. Okay? If they don't have the warrant, then the police officer is using his or her own judgment on the scene. And what they're having to do at that time is they have to articulate for anyone like me or their supervisors later what reasonable suspicion did they have that that person was committing a crime or was about to commit a crime. And to search the person, you'd also have to show that not only do I think that person's committed a crime or is about to commit a crime, but I also believe they're armed and dangerous. So there has to be a reasonable suspicion that they can articulate as to why it's there. Otherwise, they can't do it.
Alan, how has technology changed police brutality and those types of claims over the years?
Well, it's changed it a lot, and I think it's why it's become so topical around the country, because now, with the advent of cell phones and, you know, there's the video, and it's so clear and you can see so much, and everybody has one. Right. Whether the police have theirs on or not, most people have their cell phones, and I guess the first one I can think of was the Rodney King incident a long time ago. But since that time, it's become very common for an incident with police to be videoed, and that has changed things now, because up till that point, I think we as a society were conditioned to just believe what the police account of the incident was, and it still happens, and it still happens a lot, even with video. But it's not uncommon for an incident to occur where the police say, yes, this person tried to assault me, or this person resisted arrest and I had to tase him or her, or I had to, you know, punch him or her to get her under control. And up until the advent of technology, that was typically accepted, and even if you sued over that, people were not likely to believe the criminal suspect in that instance.
Do you think it's a good idea for all police officers? There's been a big push over the last 5 years, all police officers to have video on
I absolutely do. And I know there's been some complaint by law enforcement about that, but my response to that is, if you're doing your job and you're doing it the way you're supposed to, why not video it and show that? I think that it's even more likely that what people call frivolous claims would be dismissed right away, you know, if you have a video of it.
You know, when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about how the damages work in these type cases, because it's a unique type of case to start with, and the damages are unique too compared to traditional personal injury cases. So we need to talk about those.
All right, we'll step aside our first break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder of how you can join the conversation. We'd love to have you chime in as well. Call, text, email. Also, a reminder: an attorney standing by right now to speak with you. You can also find the firm of Hollis Wright. If you'll search that term, find them on Facebook, and on Twitter, it's Hollis_Wright. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Welcome back in to the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And our topic of conversation, police brutality. Hey, just a reminder, Facebook is a great way for you to continue this conversation. If you'll like the firm of Hollis Wright, just search that Hollis Wright on Facebook. These conversations continue long after the show goes off. So let me encourage you to check out the firm's Facebook page. Great resource for you there as well. Josh?
So one of the things we kind of went out to commercial on was with reference to damages in these cases. And I know there are circumstances where there could be state court-based damages, damages under federal law. That's kind of a unique breed to, or a unique issue to these type cases. What do you see most often as far as, and how do you advise clients on what potential damages they can recover?
Okay, it's not that different from state law claims like a personal injury claim, because typically when I'm being consulted, when someone's consulting with me about a potential case, it's because they've been injured in some way, hurt in some way. Now, some people want to sue over, being detained and having their rights violated, but there's not any, without some measurable damage to go with it, I don't talk to them very long, because there's nothing to that. So really, it's if you've been physically injured and you've incurred, medical bills, lost time from work, pain and suffering, the same sort of things you would see in a typical state law claim is usually what are involved in these type of 1983 cases. And
do you see these in the context of cases just in society, or do you see them also inside jails when people are already detained? How do you break that down?
Very good question, because it is. And
all my questions are great, by the way. I have not told you.
And I've noticed that over the years. But honestly, it depends. Yes, you have, even if you're being held in police custody, they have a duty, they being your sheriff's deputies or your jailers at the police jail, have a duty to protect you from harm, and either harm from themselves or other inmates. Now, if you've been convicted and have been sent to prison, those claims are more difficult to bring, because now the 8th Amendment standards apply, and that's a deliberate indifference standard. If you are just being held awaiting trial, you've been arrested or maybe put in a drunk tank or something like that on a misdemeanor, and a guard has gotten tired of something you've had to say and decides to take matters into his own hands, yes, you can bring a claim against that guard. The same protections apply, and those protections are under the 4th Amendment, which means you cannot be the subject of unreasonable force by police under those circumstances.
You guys were talking earlier about how cell phones have really kind of changed the conversation here on this. A question we have here, can a police officer prevent bystanders from using their phones to video police officer encounters with citizens?
Legally, they cannot. In practice, they often do. They just don't like it. But the law is that in most states, and every state is different, but some states have tried to pass laws that say you cannot film police, doing their jobs. But I don't think those have been upheld where they've been challenged. But you run the risk when you do that of being typically arrested for interference with governmental operations. And the standard for that is you are intentionally, is the key word, interfering with a policeman's ability to do his job during arrest. So if you're an officer interacting with somebody and I come up and I want to get in close, yeah, I may be interfering there, because now I'm a third element for that officer to have to consider. But if you keep your distance, way back where nobody can argue that you were in some way involving yourself, then you should be able to do that. You have a right to do that.
Now, Alan, I know that there are people that come and talk to you that feel like there has been excessive force or some brutality used, where when you evaluate the case on its merits, it turns out that using what I guess has been called the force continuum, the officer was within a reasonable force that was used. And I know you got to advise people sometimes, hey, this is not going to amount to a civil rights violation or some other type of state court violation. Is that complicated to explain to folks? Because I know when we see people, a lot of times when they feel like they've been injured, they think somebody is responsible for it, but sometimes they're responsible for their own conduct.
That's correct. And a good place to start to answer that question is an officer can use force, whatever degree of force he deems necessary to bring a person under control, particularly when they are resisting arrest. And so if you're not cooperating with an officer's commands and he has to instruct you to do something more than 2 or 3 times and you won't do it, and then they try to take you into custody then, like taking you by the hand, and you push back or you swing, well, guess what? You're either going to get tased or you're going to get hit with a club or something, because that is legal. And I have people come in those circumstances a lot and have to explain to them, yeah, he may have hit you more times than you liked, but you resisted and you interrupted that force continuum when you did that. And typically I turn those cases down.
Yeah, you know, and as we often say, David, in these types of shows, you know, whether it's in the trucking context or car accidents or whatever, you know, this show is not an indictment on any industry. There are a lot of incredible police officers that risk their life on a daily basis. They do an incredible job. You know, this type in this area of the law is about those officers that have crossed the line and do it the wrong way. And so,
that's right.
You know, it's there are many times in personal injury cases that I have to go back to a client or a product liability case and say, look, I'm sorry, you don't have a claim. Here are the reasons why. The law does not protect you in this circumstance, or you contributed to your own injury and therefore you don't have an actionable claim. The same thing is true with Alan's work in this area. It's sometimes the person contributed to the event that took place. The officer was within the bounds that are allowed to be able to make sure that he is protected and safe at all times too.
Another question we have here about police behavior during a traffic stop. Can a police officer order the driver to get out of the car or the passengers?
And the answer is yes for both. And a lot of times people don't understand that the passenger, who may just be minding his or her own business, they get mad sometimes when they say, I want you to get out of the car. Well, they can require you to do that. And they can even ask for your ID, and you have to follow that order. It's a lawful order.
Is there an amount of information that you have to give to be respectful to the officer, but you can stop there?
That's right. I mean, there's nothing in the law or the Constitution that says you have to thank an officer for pulling you over and giving you a ticket. And you can even be mad about it. Yeah. So just as long as you don't cross the line.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Let's step aside.
Okay.
Time to take our final break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder of how you can join our conversation. Call, text, email. We'd love to hear from you. And also a reminder, Facebook, Twitter, Hollis Wright, on social media as well. Another great way for you to continue the conversation and be kept up to date on what is happening at the firm of Hollis Wright. Stay tuned. More of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm Tyler Vale with the law firm of Hollis Wright. As with any industry, it's important in the legal world to hire an attorney that is knowledgeable and has a track record of success. But with so many attorneys out there and so many different types of cases, how does someone decide the right lawyer to hire? In this week's Legal 411, we're answering the question, what should I consider in hiring an attorney? In-state versus out-of-state, big firm or little firm? Recommendations from friends or family, the internet, the phone book, or TV. With so many choices and so much information, it can be an overwhelming task trying to make the right decision. To complicate things, choosing a lawyer is an important and sometimes life-affecting decision and should not be taken lightly. So how do you select an attorney? Do your research. Look the firm up on the internet. Ask friends and family whether they know or have any experience with a specific firm. If you know any local lawyers, ask them about the reputation of the firms you may be considering. Call a local law office and ask if they are handling cases like yours. There's a good chance they can help you, but if they can't, they can always refer you to someone they respect who handles your type of case. And remember, ask questions face to face. Ask about their experience in handling cases like yours. How often someone from their office will be available to you, and what you can expect during the process. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you.
Welcome back into the Attorneys Hour final segment. So just a few minutes remaining for tonight's show, but also for the opportunity for you to speak with an attorney that is standing by right now to speak with you. So take advantage of that opportunity. Call, text, email. Josh?
You know, and I don't think I saw the firm fact coming back in that relates to kind of a race breakdown of those that have been arrested versus those who are incarcerated. I don't think the show is really about that. But let me ask you this question, because I do often wonder this. When we see these things on the news where, for example, there is a Caucasian police officer engaged in an altercation with an African-American male or female, and it appears from the start to have this political motivation, and it just explodes in the media. I mean, I know you've seen these over and over and over again. And what I have noticed recently is the same thing is happening even when you have an African-American police officer with an African-American. And that to me is interesting, because I would think that one would be more politically charged versus the other. But is it really more about the conduct of officers that people are complaining about in today's society more so than the race issue, you think? I know that's a kind of a tough question, but race has to play into some of these issues.
No doubt.
But, because I know you see it and I see it too, we all see it in society. But at the end of the day, it seems to be more an indictment on the conduct of the officer than it does the race of the officer. Maybe I've just misinterpreted that, but it's kind of what I've seen over the years.
Well, I think it depends on the facts of what you're looking at. There are cases where it is clearly a race-motivated situation. And there are cases, I've handled several here in Birmingham, where you have a victim who's African-American, and you learn that the police officers involved were all also African Americans. And while the uproar isn't really there for those, as they are for the white officers on a black victim, it is interesting. And I've always been very curious myself, the amount of pressure an African American officer must be under sometimes in those situations. And I try to be sensitive to that and think about that. But I also think, we're all humans, regardless of our skin color. And we're all flawed, and that includes police officers sometimes, and white or black. I've just seen where people lose their temper, or they make a mistake, or sometimes a badge makes an officer power drunk. They've got a lot of power, and sometimes these aren't the best people to have that much power, regardless of their skin color. So I see there are cases where we've seen them in the national news recently, the one in South Carolina where the African-American man is running away from the white officer who just shoots and executes him. There's no doubt about that. And personally, I have to believe there's race motivation there. And you see a lot of examples like that, and I don't question that. How are these claims investigated from the police perspective? And do you get access to that internal investigation when you file your suit? How does that work? Another really good question, Josh. Well, thank you. I'll tell you that this is probably the most difficult area of what I do, because 9 times out of 10, when there's a police brutality complaint, if a citizen feels like an officer was too rough or did something wrong, they complain to that police department. That's where you go. And that triggers an internal affairs investigation by officers of the same police department, okay? And while they like to tell themselves that we're independent of each other and we do an objective investigation, I really haven't seen much evidence of that over the years of my practice. But what's problematic with that is there aren't really statistics kept by most of the police departments here in Alabama. But I can tell you nationally there have been some statistics published that would indicate you've got somewhere around 10% of complaints are considered valid. The other 90%, the officer is not punished and is exonerated. I would say in Alabama it's not even that much. It's probably less than 5% based on the litigation I've been in, and I've taken a lot of depositions over the years of internal affairs investigators about how they do that investigation. And normally their investigation is, we will hear what the victim has to say, we will interview all the officers, but they rarely, if ever, interview independent eyewitnesses. And when you don't do that, I think that really undermines the credibility of those investigations. Well, and also kind of highlights the importance of some of the technology that's now available, whether it's audio, whether it's video, whatever it may be.
You guys have kind of seen the good, bad, and the ugly so often in society. We're all fathers. I think we're all fathers of 3 kids, I think. I'm just curious as to what advice do you give parents in how to advise their children before, you know, that 16-year-old who now can drive and they're behind the wheel of the car? You know, what kind of advice do you give parents on how to advise their kids?
I'll tell you what I advise my kids to do, and they're teenagers. And I tell them, when, you know, try to think ahead of time where you're going, what you're going to be doing. If you're going to a concert, are you going to have a group of teenagers with you? You're going to attract attention, probably.
Right.
Hopefully no one's got alcohol with them in the car. But the main thing I tell them to do is, if you're stopped, you need to cooperate and be polite and respectful to that officer, regardless of how he's treating you.
Yeah.
That usually leads to a better outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are certain things in life where the filter has to help you make quick decisions and make them in the right direction and go in the right direction, because you can get to a fork in the road with an officer or in Little League coaching or whatever it may be in life, in a workplace environment and issue. You can get to a fork in the road and you can choose the wrong path, and the wrong path can be dangerous, or you can choose the right one. The same thing works with police officers. I think respect and trying to work your way through a situation without being disrespectful is going to put you in the best light in front of the officer to hopefully allow you to go about your way quickly.
We have about a minute and a half remaining, but I want to give both of you the opportunity for a final comment. We'll start with you.
Okay, well, I would say, you know, along the lines of your last question, it's difficult for me sometimes because we have rights that, you know, people have fought and died for these rights. When we talk about freedoms in this country, and we use that word a lot, sometimes I want to ask people, what are you talking about? What freedoms are you really referring to? And we're talking about those freedoms given to us in the Constitution, and that is important. People have died for those, and officers need to respect those. I think individuals need to respect officers, but officers need to respect those rights, and they don't always do that.
Josh?
Yeah, you know, and I would echo that, but also say, and I know Alan would too, there are a lot of officers doing it the right way in today's society, and for those, you should be commended. You're putting your life at risk every day that you go out as an officer. For those that are doing it the wrong way, there are lawyers like Alan and others that can help lead, guide, and direct you through the process. So if you've been through that process, if you're in it now, talk with a lawyer to help kind of protect your rights.
A difficult conversation tonight, but you guys did a great job. Appreciate both of you being here. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for joining us. We're always appreciative of your time each and every Sunday evening. As we wrap things up, here's how you can continue the conversation, and an attorney standing by for a few more minutes. Take advantage of that. We'll see you next week right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.